Mohammad Najibullah, the leader of the KHAD, Afghanistan's Soviet-backed secret police, had one of the craziest ends ever. KHAD was a tool of terror against the Afghan people, with the goal of suppressing internal enemies of the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, monitoring every aspect of life, and suppressing any dissent. Najibullah oversaw mass arrests, kidnappings, torture, executions, psychological warfare, and persecution of minorities such as Hindus and Sikhs. He ran the infamous Puli Chakai prison where 27,000 people were executed. KHAD operated with the Soviets' assistance, including borrowed equipment like an electric shock machine. As president from 1987, he attempted reforms, moving away from socialism toward Afghan nationalism, abolishing the one-party state, and making Islam the state religion. However, he failed to gain support. After the Soviet Union collapsed and his forces began defecting, Najibullah resigned in April 1992 and sought refuge in the UN compound in Kabul. He remained there until September 1996, when the Taliban seized the city and abducted him from the compound, tortured him, dragged him through the streets, emasculated him, shot him, and hanged his body from a traffic light outside the presidential palace. His brother was given the same treatment. Genrikh Yagoda, the first head of the Soviet NKVD, met a brutal end. He created the Gulag labor camp system and oversaw mass suppression of peasant uprisings, executions of clergy, ethnic minorities, and intellectuals. He also supervised the White Sea-Baltic Canal project with penal labor, during which up to 25,000 workers died. Yagoda organized the first Moscow show trial in 1936, marking the start of the Great Purge. Ironically, Yagoda himself ultimately became a victim of the purge, since Stalin grew dissatisfied with him over poor handling of the trials, alleged ties to the opposition, and failure to detect conspiracies. Yagoda was replaced by Nikolai Yezhov, and then arrested in 1937 on charges of treason, corruption, diamond smuggling, and spying for Germany. After being beaten on Yezhov's orders, Yagoda was forced to watch other condemned prisoners executed before he was shot. Reinhard Heydrich was Heinrich Himmler's deputy, head of the SS intelligence agency Sicherheitsdienst and secret police Gestapo in Nazi Germany. He led efforts to crush resistance through arrests, deportations, and murders, especially in occupied Czech lands. He organized the Kristallnacht pogroms, oversaw the Einsatzgruppen death squads, and was a chief planner of the Holocaust. But he met a slow, agonizing end. On the morning of May 27, 1942, Heydrich left his home for his daily commute to Prague Castle. As his car slowed at a tight turn, resistance fighter Josef Gabčík stepped forward and aimed his gun, but it jammed. Instead of ordering his driver to accelerate, Heydrich stood up and drew his pistol. At that moment, Jan Kubiš threw a grenade, which struck the car's rear wheel. Shrapnel and fragments tore into Heydrich, damaging his spleen, ribs, lung, and diaphragm. He and his driver pursued the attackers, but Heydrich soon collapsed. Rushed to the hospital, Heydrich eventually developed sepsis and died on June 4, 1942. His assassination triggered brutal reprisals, including the destruction of Lidice, mass executions, and over 13,000 arrests. Nazi ceremonies honored him as one of their most important leaders. Teymur Bakhtiar, founder and head of Iran's CIA-backed secret police SAVAK, built it into a powerful tool of Shah Pahlavi's regime, suppressing dissent, crushing communists, socialists, and Islamists. After losing a bid for the prime ministership in 1961 and plotting against the Shah, he was exposed, removed from SAVAK, and sent abroad. Following a brief arrest in Lebanon in 1968, he moved to Iraq, where in 1970, Iranian SAVAK agents infiltrated his inner circle. On 12th of August, during a hunting trip, one of them shot him in the shoulder, disarming him. His Iraqi bodyguard was taken out before he could react, and Bakhtiar was then shot 5 more times in the torso and hand, dying on the spot. Son Sen was the chief of Santebal, the Khmer Rouge secret police in Democratic Kampuchea, Cambodia, under Pol Pot. He oversaw internal security and the notorious prison camps such as Tuol Sleng, where thousands were imprisoned, mistreated, and executed. He personally ordered the massacre of over 100,000 people in the Eastern Zone during the final 6 months of 1978. By that time, Sen was managing border clashes with Vietnamese forces. As the war with Vietnam turned against the Khmer Rouge, Sen himself fell under suspicion and narrowly avoided being targeted by his own security apparatus due to the 1979 Vietnamese invasion. After the invasion and the establishment of a pro-Vietnamese regime, Sen resumed leadership of Khmer Rouge forces. He later negotiated with the Cambodian government to facilitate Khmer Rouge reintegration into politics. This effort led to his removal from power in May 1992 by Ta Mok. On June 15, 1997, Pol Pot ordered Son Sen's execution, along with 13 members of his family, believing Sen was negotiating a surrender with the Cambodian government. Sen and his family were shot, and their bodies were crushed by trucks in a brutal final act. Koçi Xoxe, chief of Albania's Sigurimi secret police and interior minister, enforced Enver Hoxha's communist rule through torture, brutal purges, executions and labor camps, while aligning closely with Yugoslavia's Josip Broz Tito, who sought to absorb Albania. Backed by Tito, Xoxe purged rivals with anti-Yugoslav sentiments like economy minister Naku Spiru. Hoxha soon began to fear Xoxe as a rival to his power. Eventually, Tito pissed off Stalin, which led him to side with Albania. When Stalin turned against Tito, Hoxha used Soviet backing to cancel ties with Yugoslavia and expel its advisors. Xoxe tried to switch allegiance to Moscow and arrest pro-Tito officials, but the Central Committee removed him from power and expelled him from the party. Arrested in November 1948, he was tortured until confessing to working for British intelligence and Tito. In June 1949, he was hanged for treason. Kim Jae-gyu was the director of South Korea's KCIA, a position of immense power under Park Chung-hee's dictatorship. The KCIA coordinated domestic and international intelligence, suppressed opposition and engaged in widespread human rights abuses, including violence, political killings and kidnappings. On October 26, 1979, during a banquet at a safe house, Kim shot President Park Chung-hee, Park's security chief, and several presidential guards. The motives remain disputed, ranging from a desire to prevent planned bloodshed and restore democracy to personal rivalry and ambitions for power. Kim's plan to gain broader institutional support failed. He was arrested, tried by a tribunal for murder and treason, and executed by hanging in May 1980 along with several co-conspirators. Gheorghe Pintelie was a Soviet NKVD agent and the first director of Romania's Securitate secret police, building it into a 60,000-strong force. He directed mass repression against class enemies, such as landowners, intellectuals and clergy, ordering arrests, executions and deportations like the Baragan operation, which displaced 40,000 people. He oversaw forced collectivization, sending resisting farmers to labor camps, and allowed the Pitești experiment, a re-education program in which inmates were forced to abuse each other, leading to numerous deaths. He also used forced labor on projects like the Danube Black Sea Canal, where thousands perished. Pintelie personally carried out political killings while running show trials and purges in Stalinist style. Amid Romania's anti-Soviet turn in 1963, Pintelie was forced into retirement and later expelled from the Communist Party in 1968 under Ceausescu, though never prosecuted. He died of natural causes in 1985 and was buried with full honors. Kang Sheng oversaw the Chinese Ministry of Public Security and became a central figure in the CCP's campaigns of ideological control. In the early 1940s, he orchestrated the rectification movement, consolidating party ideology while purging perceived enemies, setting the precedent for future repression and enforced conformity. A close ally of Mao Zedong, Kang instigated deadly purges and enforced harsh control during the Cultural Revolution. He used his security forces to carry out mass arrests, public humiliations, and persecution of intellectuals and anyone deemed counter-revolutionary. Under his oversight, torture and abuse were employed to extract confessions. Kang died of bladder cancer in 1975 in Beijing. He was later disgraced and posthumously expelled from the Communist Party in 1980 for his excesses. Dai Li, serving as Chiang Kai-shek's most trusted spy master in nationalist China, headed the Bureau of Investigation and Statistics, or short Yuntong, transforming it into a vast secret police network tasked with eliminating Japanese agents, communists, and political rivals. Known as China's Himmler, he oversaw assassinations, kidnappings, mistreatment, and executions. By 1945, the Yuntong had 100,000 operatives, with Dai Li personally directing high-profile hits that claimed thousands of lives during the Second Sino-Japanese War and Chinese Civil War. On March 17, 1946, he died in a plane crash near Nanjing while returning from a meeting with Chiang. Officially attributed to bad weather and pilot error, suspicions were connected to Kuomintang rivals, the Chinese Communist Party's Kangsheng, and even the American OSS, given Dai's anti-American stance. Jindřich Vesely was the first chief of Czechoslovakia's state security, short STB, a staunch communist who built it into a Stalinist instrument of repression and mass surveillance after 1948. He directed mass arrests, blackmail, purges, and executions targeting anti-communists, clergy, and political opponents. Under his leadership, the STB employed torture, including beatings, electric shocks, solitary confinement, and psychological terror such as threats to families and mock executions. Operations like Border Stone targeted citizens attempting to flee across the Iron Curtain. Vesely also oversaw show trials against Catholic leaders and other perceived enemies, solidifying communist control. Amid intensifying Stalinist purges, Vesely feared becoming a target himself and attempted unalivement in March 1950 by jumping from a window, but survived. In March 1964, haunted by his own terror machine, he leapt again, this time fatally. Fernando Gutierrez Barrios led Mexico's DFS during the height of the country's dirty war from 1964 to 70. He transformed the agency, founded in 1947 with CIA assistance, into a powerful anti-communist apparatus aimed at crushing guerrillas, student movements, and political dissidents. Under his command, the DFS was implicated in the 1968 Tlatelolco massacre, where hundreds of students were disappeared, as well as in systematic torture methods including electric shocks, waterboarding, and submersion in excrement. While hunting Fidel Castro in 1956, he was recruited as a Cuban informant, yet he simultaneously worked with the CIA. Despite his role in violent repression, he rose to prominent political posts, serving as senator, governor, and later Secretary of the Interior. In December 1997, he was kidnapped in Mexico City by a heavily armed group and released after a multi-million peso ransom. He died during heart surgery on October 30, 2000 in Mexico City. Manuel Piñeiro, known as Red Beard, was the first head of Cuba's G2 intelligence service from 1961 to 64, overseeing surveillance, torture, arbitrary detention, and suppression of dissent while backing communist guerrilla movements across Latin America. Working closely with the KGB and Czechoslovak STB, he trained insurgents, dismantled anti-communist networks in Cuba, and ran controversial revolutionary tribunals. In 1998, he died in a car crash in Havana under circumstances that remain unclear, with speculation ranging from an accident to an assassination by anti-Castro forces or internal rivals. Aleksandar Ranković, Yugoslavia's third most powerful man after Tito and Edvard Kardelj, was head of the State Security Service, UDBA, the regime's feared intelligence and secret police. Under his leadership, the UDBA carried out extensive surveillance and the alleged elimination of thousands of perceived enemies at home and abroad, including around 200 assassinations and kidnappings. He retired to Dubrovnik and died in 1983 from a heart attack. Gábor Péter was head of Hungary's State Protection Authority from 1945 to 52, overseeing mass arrests, torture, and political purges to support the ruling Hungarian Working People's Party. The AVH ran internment camps such as Rech, staged show trials, and targeted perceived threats such as Roman Catholic Cardinal József Mindszenty and the 1949 execution of communist leader Laszlo Rajk for Titoism, signaling Yugoslavia's break with the Soviet bloc. In 1952, during the Soviet anti-cosmopolitan campaign, Péter was removed from office, arrested, and in 1954 sentenced to life imprisonment, accused of being a Zionist spy. He was released in 1959 and lived quietly until his death of natural causes in a Budapest hospital in 1993. Manuel Contreras, head of Chile's secret police DINA under Augusto Pinochet, was the regime's second most powerful man and a key figure in Operation Condor, coordinating assassinations across Latin America. Under his command, DINA kidnapped, tortured, and disappeared thousands of leftists and dissidents, raided homes, censored the press, burned books, and tracked anyone tied to leftist movements. In 1976, DINA agents assassinated exiled Chilean diplomat Orlando Letelier in Washington, D.C. with a car bomb. The fallout strained Contreras' relationship with Pinochet, leading to DINA's dissolution in 1977. In 1993, he was sentenced to 7 years for Letelier's murder. At his death, he was serving 59 sentences totaling 529 years for kidnapping, forced disappearances, and assassinations. Contreras died of heart failure in a Santiago military hospital in 2015. Agostinho Lourenço was the founder and head of Portugal's PVDE, which became the PIDE in 1945 under Salazar's Estado Novo regime. From 1933, he structured the secret police, defining its methods of repression and political prison system, including Tarrafal concentration camp, for suppressing dissent. He had full authority to investigate and arrest anyone suspected of plotting against the state, enforcing arbitrary detention, assassinations, surveillance, plus psychological and physical torture. PVDE focused on combating communism and responding to threats from the Spanish Civil War and anarchist attacks on Salazar, adopting methods influenced by Italian and German advisors akin to the Gestapo. During World War II, while Portugal remained neutral, Lourenço restricted refugees, including Jews fleeing Nazi Europe, treating them as spies or threats. Despite these actions, he maintained a relationship with MI6, which later facilitated his 1956 election as president of Interpol. Retiring after Interpol, he lived quietly until his 1964 death in Lisbon. Felix Dzerzhinsky, known as Iron Felix, founded and led the Cheka, the Bolshevik secret police, in 1970. Tasked with defending the new Soviet regime, he targeted counter-revolutionaries, clergy, and bourgeois elements, but soon expanded repression to all opposition, including anarchists and rival leftist groups. As a chief architect of the Red Terror and de-Cossacization, he oversaw mass arrests without trial, executions, and kidnappings. Under his leadership, the Cheka was known for skinning, burning, crucifying, and impaling people that resisted the Bolsheviks. He initiated the Gulag forced labor system and violently suppressed uprisings. Dzerzhinsky suddenly died from a heart attack in 1926 in Moscow, right after delivering a fiery speech to the Bolshevik Central Committee. He was buried in the Kremlin Wall necropolis. Erich Mielke, head of East Germany's Stasi, built it into one of the most oppressive secret police forces in the world, relying on mass surveillance, intimidation, and both psychological and physical torture. The agency ran 17 prisons, used forced labor, and targeted anyone suspected of escape attempts, with Mielke overseeing the construction of the Berlin Wall to trap citizens inside East Germany. After the fall of the wall in 1989, he was arrested and convicted for corruption and the murders of 2 policemen in 1931. A separate trial over the killings of 260 defectors at the inner German border was dropped after he was declared mentally unfit. He was also accused of ordering the 1981 Baader-Meinhof terrorist attacks against US personnel in West Germany. Released in 1995 due to ill health and dementia, he died from natural causes in 2000 in a Berlin nursing home. Hours after his funeral, flowers on his grave were destroyed by unknown vandals.